In this module, we're going to do a simple little watercolour, another landscape, but we're going to do a little Highland cottage and just capture the essence of that with the watercolours. So again, like we've done in some of the previous landscapes, we're going to just create a little wash for our sky. We'll just take the colour of blue that we want to mix from our palette, and we shall load the brush, and we'll apply a wash from the top of our page just to create the effect of the sky. Now, one of the things that's useful to do with skies is to start to think about the tops of the clouds, where the differentiation between the blue of the sky and the whiteness of the clouds. And what we'll do is we'll just draw down some of the wash that we've created and create the kind of crowns with the brush, just gently. So we're making an uneven sort of ridge of just the blue colour that we've laid onto the watercolour. So this will give us, just quite quickly, I'm just going to load more darker blue just to complement that right away. Just drop it in, and we've now got two tones of blue. So this is wet in wet, where you take another glaze and add it in while it's wet, and it means that you can actually create two tones of blue before it hits the clouds. And the underside of the clouds also darker, so we can create quite simply another band of the sky. I'm using the flat brush here just to run around and move the paint on the sort of leading edge, which is sharper. Okay. And again, just move the paint around, you get more confidence, and you can still draw some of the paint down. And again, form is re-emphasise where the tops of the clouds are. I'll take another brush just to shape them with the tip of the dagger brush, and that just softens them slightly. Okay, so that's the basis of our sky. Quite quick, two washes, one darker and one lighter, and we're just blending, and you just build up confidence with your sky as you come down. Keep it simple, and that'll be the most effective way. You make them more complicated when you get more experience. Basically, the cottage is sitting in a sort of wee Highland glen, and we'll have a wee fence in the foreground just to act as a sort of lead us into the picture. So the easiest way with the cottages, I feel, is just think of the roof first. So a tiled roof, and we'll take some lamp black. I'll just mix it in my dish, and I'll take a little bit of Chinese white, and that gives us a wee grey tone, a slaty grey for our roof. So we'll just form, just keeping clear of the sky, we'll just form the outline of our roof, and then we can just fill in. But I'm going to deliberately leave some little white gaps for a wee roof light. That's called negative painting, if we leave a little gap of white. So why paint white when you can actually use the white of the paper? Now, the light source in this case is coming from right to left, so we can put the chimney pot and just give it a little tone on the chimney. And the second chimney further back, slightly smaller because of this perspective. And then we can just create a couple of lines just to establish this sort of shape of the roof. We'll just do the other edge of the, so we can form the gable. Don't paint the gable because the light's going to hit that, so we'll use that as a sort of whitewashed cottage. We'll just now bring the landscape to meet the cottage, so it's not a tall cottage, so I'm just going to take some green, make a green wash for the garden croft in front. Just going to curve that round and just form a nice sort of simple wash that just creates a sort of field in front of the cottage. Again, you could drop in a couple of different greens just to give it a wee bit of variation. I'm going to take a bit of yellow ochre, which is a sort of tan coloured paint. I'm just going to do a wee secondary mound of landscape just rising from that field, and that will just give us a wee bit of perspective. Okay, and we can use that yellow ochre, go back to the tray and just take that and we'll just do a wee toning colour, which is a mix of the grey we've mixed, and it forms a little shading for some of the lower clouds, might have a bit more shadow in them, so we can create a little band of clouds above that hill. The lower the clouds are in the distance, because of perspective, they're smaller in the sky. So we'll just create a wee band. And again, we can maybe do a wee couple of lines just to indicate a wee bit of the landscape running behind the cottage. Okay, quite simple. Now, I'm going to put a tiny bit of red for a wee barn roof, which is going to be extra outbuilding just in front of the cottage. So again, just going to lay that in, a wee terracotta tiled roof, which is quite typical, or a wee clad roof. Now, we've got the light arriving on the gable there, so we'll just do a little wash of that grey that we had, warm grey, and we'll just, again, leave a wee gap for little windows that just tuck under the eaves, and a wee doorway, because they don't have big windows, they have little tiny wee windows. And we'll let that dry, and then we can finally add a wee bit balance. Okay, so we'll now think about little windows. So we can emphasize that. We're just going to, because they're quite deep, they're shaded, we're just going to drop in, take the tip of the brush, and I'm just going to drop a little bit in the roof light area, a wee bit. It's running wet and wet at the moment, but I'm going to let that run and use it as a wee shading tool. If it runs too much, just give it a blot, but we want it impressionistic, we don't want too defined. Just take a bit of tissue, lift it, and you can let that dry, and we can go back in and just drop in another wee bit detail, just to pick out the recesses of the door. And we'll put a wee tiny wee window with 4 panes in it, just 4 dabs of the brush, and you've got, then we'll put a wee shadow under the eaves, re-emphasise the chimney, and just a couple of other just washes on the roof, just to create a wee variation in the tiles. On the wee barn, we'll just put a wee shaded wall there, and tiny wee window. Pick up a bit blue this time, just drop that in. It's tucking it, it's just coming into the hillside here. That's just bled into the green, which hasn't quite dried, so just lift it with a bit of tissue, and then you can just lift that off. If anything bleeds, just take a bit of tissue, lift it back before it dries, and then we can rework that. Now I'm just creating a wee bit depth by just sketching in. Now I'm going to use that darker colour for on the distance, put a wee hedgerow, which will be very distant, just to give it scale. Very simply. And a couple of lines in the landscape for shadows. And a wee tree in the background. We'll just do that in silhouette, so it can be quite dark with that. These are in the shadow, so we're just differentiating it against the wee wash that we put down earlier. And then a couple of wee ridges where the light's not reaching. And so the cottage is just nestled in there. And we'll put a wee couple of fins. We'll use a very thin brush this time. And we'll take a very dry amount of paint. I'm just going to lift a little bit of brown. And you can simply flick in, this is the foreground, a couple of posts. And it's quite good to do the posts at an angle because they're never quite straight. Just darken that up a bit. Couple of posts. And put a wee bit shading on one side at the edge. Just a wee shadow line. Just to, again, because the light's coming from left to right. And now a wee bit of wire coming through the fence. Just flick it through. You don't even have to do a continuous line. Just keep it. And then we'll just re-emphasise a couple of wee shading areas. And of course there might be a wee shadow at the back of the cottage on the landscape, so we'll just put that in just to give us a bit of scale. And a wee bit shading on the trees just on the left hand side, because the light's coming from the right. It just gives a bit of depth. Just use the tip of the little brush and sketch away and add some little details. Again, just ground that little barn. Just gives it a wee bit of variation. A couple of random lines coming through help just to break up the scene. And the wee chimney pots, pick up a tiny wee bit of red, just a wee dab of red up at the top. And I'm going to put a wee dash of red, because red's a good little just point of interest colour. So although we've got the red roof there, we'll just put a wee tiny amount, like a wee pot in front of the house or something. And a wee flick on the fences just to warm up the tone. And that is virtually all we need to do to create the wee sort of cottage scene. And finally, usual, we'll just give it a wee signature. And the wee three birds. And that's your wee cottage, Highland cottage, just nestled in the glen. Now we've finished this little cottage. I hope you'll enjoy having a go at it yourself, and I look forward to seeing you again.